City Council for October 23rd, 2019. Carla, please call the roll.
Udaley, Fritz,
Here.
Fish,
Here.
Hardesty,
Here.
Wheeler.
The mayor's in Japan representing the city with our sister city. Could we have a shortened version of the rules, please?
I will try to read it as quickly as I can.
All right.
I don't have an abbreviated version, I'm sorry.
We should have an abbreviation version.
Welcome to the Portland City Council. The City Council represents all Portlanders and meets to do the city's business. The presiding officer preserves order and decorum during city council meetings so everyone can feel welcome, comfortable, respected, and safe.
Hang on a second. I'm going to do it. That's very good, but I'm going to do it briefly. Just everybody behave like normal adults, then I think things will go very well, and I'm sure that you will. So thank you very much, and if you don't, you'll get tossed out.
Madam President?
Commissioner Fish.
Madam President, I ask that we suspend the rules.
So, yes, indeed.
And I'd like to request that Bureau of Environmental Services Director Mike Jordan and Annie Von Berg please come forward to the table.
This is just a very brief non-agenda item, which we will do before we get to the regular agenda this afternoon.
Colleagues, the Office of Management and Finance recently established the annual Betsy Ames Leadership Award, which honors Betsy's memory and her dedication to improving the city of Portland and our community. I had the great honor of working with Betsy in a number of capacities on one of my campaigns, as a city employee, as a bureau leader, and as my chief of staff. I know from firsthand experience that she was an incredible asset to our city. This leadership award is presented to a city employee who exemplifies the depth of Betsy's great work. And Annie Von Berg from the Bureau of Environmental Services is this year's inaugural recipient. I'd like to congratulate the two other finalists, Tracy Reeve, the city attorney, and Summer Erickson from the Bureau of Emergency Management. Now, as you know, colleagues, Annie oversees the city of Portland's efforts to clean up the Willamette River. And she works compassionately and tirelessly and effectively with a wide variety of public and private stakeholders involved in this $1 billion cleanup. She's a highly respected leader and a mentor to many employees at the city. And we are collectively grateful for her service. So congratulations, Annie, and I'd like to introduce Mike Jordan, who nominated her, to just very briefly tell us about Annie.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, City Councilors. Probably the best way to say why I nominated Annie is to recall some of Betsy's characteristics. She was an unmatched professional. She was politically astute. She understood that persistence pays in this business. She was warm and personable, and she had an inner strength in what are often tumultuous times in our business, and she was steady as a rock. All those things Annie exhibits, but one other that's kind of closer, at least for me. I'm a fan of the Tao Te Ching, and the Tao has a saying about leaders that the worst leaders are those that are despised, and the next best are those that are feared. The next, those that are praised and loved. But the very best leaders are the ones that at the end of the day, when the work is done, the people say they did it themselves. And Annie exemplifies that in spades. She is never the one who takes credit. She's always the one bolstering her team. And I'm very, very, I don't mean to sound paternalistic, but I'm very, very proud of her. So thank you for giving me the opportunity, Commissioner.
Well, thank you very much. And Annie, I just can't tell you how proud I am that you were selected for this award in a very competitive field. And Betsy was a special person, and I can't think of someone more deserving of the award. Would you care to say something?
Well, thank you so much. The kind words, they mean so much. And I just thank the leadership for creating this award and this tradition. It's such an honor to be with these other women that have been nominated. Betsy's life and legacy is somebody I truly admire and aspire to work towards. So this has been a humbling experience, and my team that I'm such a privilege to be a part of is 9 strong women, and we've accomplished a lot this year, and it's the support of this commission and Director Jordan that's made that possible. So thank you so much for the opportunity to work hard for you and do this work.
Thank you.
Director Jordan, I'm going to needle you just a little bit.
Uh-oh.
I'm going to say women must be really good leaders because we are used to people taking credit for our work. And I think that highlights the necessity to give credit where it is due, and it's certainly due here. Congratulations. And I also like the
That was the nicest needle I've ever had, Commissioner.
And by
Thank
the
you.
way, there was some small print in the award that we have to also acknowledge, which is that any recipient of this award cannot consider any other career opportunities for the next 5 years. So we're grateful that we're going to have a chance to work with Annie through the next big chapter of Superfund. But congratulations, and we're all very proud of you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Fish. That was nice. Suspend the rules. Carla, please read item 994.
Amend the seismic design requirements for existing building code related to required placarding and tenant notification for unreinforced masonry buildings and associated timeline and documentation of compliance.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to make a motion to add an emergency clause to
Second.
this. It's been moved.
And for the purposes of,
And for the purposes of, it's in the public's interest to ensure that we do this as promptly as possible.
Second?
okay, please call the roll on the amendment.
Udaley?
Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Hardesty?
Aye.
Fritz?
I believe if you're going to pull off the Band-Aid, do it as quickly as possible. Aye. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, and thank you, colleagues, for allowing this to become an emergency ordinance. As you know, when I took office on January 2nd, there were several pieces of work that were on my desk. One was the implementation of the ordinance around the unenforced masonry buildings. I want to be really clear. The action that we take today in no way backs the city away from our commitment to ensuring that we have a city that is resilient from any of the big its that fall upon us. It is our goal to work with community, with business owners, with nonprofits, with faith institutions to ensure that we identify as many opportunities as possible to assist people in making their buildings earthquake safe. The action that we're taking today is because, quite frankly, we need more time. We need a better process, and we need to be able to make sure that we are bringing the community along with us in this process. For people who don't know, unenforced masonry buildings are those buildings that pose a terrible threat to life and safety. FEMA considers them the most dangerous buildings when the ground shakes. After today's actions, 2 actions, we will be appointing a work group to develop solutions to the URM problems that exist in the city of Portland. In the meantime, the city of Portland's buildings placarding rules have become a distraction from the primary purpose. I spent a lot of time my first couple of months talking about pro or con putting plaques on the building. But what all of us can agree to is that the work has to happen with or without plaques on the building. For that reason, I've asked Portland Bureau of Emergency Management to bring forth an ordinance repealing the place carding rules council passed last year. Before we take up the main ordinance, I would also like to move, I already did that, never mind. So we're going to take up the main one, and I want to invite Jana, and Jana, I always am really horrible with trying to pronounce your name, so I'm going to give you the opportunity to please do it for me, and I will promise to try to repeat it appropriately.
Commissioner
Thank you.
Hardesty, it took me about a year to practice to do
Did
it,
it?
but I can
It's
do it
like-
now. This is Jonna Papa Efthimiou.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Fritz.
Papa F the me you.
You got it.
Wow.
Yeah, see you.
I still don't have it.
That's okay.
It's a beautiful name.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I before you present, I just want to tell you what an incredible experience it has been working with you, Jonna, through this process. I just want you to know how valued you are and how visionary you are and actually never taking no for an answer. So thank you very much for being here, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. So for the record, my name is Jonna Papa-Efthimiou, and I am the Planning, Policy, and Community Programs Manager at the City of Portland Bureau of Emergency Management. And the first item I'm presenting today is the repeal of the building placarding rules, tenant notification, and all the code changes that we adopted together at the same time. As Commissioner Hardesty has already said, I regret that this has really become a distraction from the main work of our bureau and of the city, which is to build a physically resilient city, and to work in partnership with community to make everyone safer. And at this point, it just seems the time and resources required to make this work, it's repealing it is a much more practical option. So, as some of you will recall, last October at this time, we were here adopting the placarding ordinance. The main ideas in the original ordinance were, one, that it required a warning sign on unreinforced masonry buildings in the city's URM inventory. And it also required building owners to notify prospective tenants when they applied for a lease that the building was a URM. And then it made a lot of smaller changes to the code to create definitions, an appeal process, and a way to enforce the rules. At the same time, we also adopted several other changes. The main one was we strengthened triggers for required seismic retrofits when an owner is doing voluntary upgrades to the building. What we did mainly was change the timeline. Previously, we looked back on 2 years' worth of improvements to see if they hit the triggers to make upgrades. When we changed the rules last year, we changed it to a 5-year look-back period. And with the change now, we'll put it back to 2 years because we're putting the code back exactly how it was previous. We also did some very bureaucratic code cleanup at the same time. We removed outdated references, we moved punctuation around to improve it, and all the changes will also need to go back. After we adopted the original ordinance, we made efforts to be more clear about its application, and in the hopes that we could design something that would work better for property owners, we made the 3 amendments that are listed there. The first one clarified the application of the rules. The second one gave a longer timeline for most building owners, and it also removed the requirement that it be recorded with the county on the title, which many building owners really did not like. And then finally, we added some language to the sign that clarified it was a sign that was required by city code. So the building owner didn't feel that they were compelled to make this speech, but they could attribute it to the city. Despite those efforts to improve the code, our notification requirement met with a legal challenge, and this summer, we were prevented from enforcing it due to potential First Amendment concerns. We're obviously disappointed with this outcome, and the case hasn't gone to trial, so we could continue to pursue it, but as we've said, it seems that this time it's consuming resources that are really better spent on making retrofits happen. Therefore, the proposed repeal before you now is to repeal all the ordinance, the 4 listed related to placarding and tenant notification, to put the entire code back to its previous state, the look-back timeline, the code cleanups, and simply have the same code that we had in September of 2018. That's my entire presentation, and I'd be happy to answer questions.
There doesn't appear to be any questions, Madam President. Are there people signed up, maybe?
Yes, we have 3 people signed up. Jim Atwood, Angie Even, and Tim Even.
Thank you very much. My name is Jim Atwood, ATWOOD, 33 Southwest 3rd, 97204.
So you've been testifying here for a while, right?
Yes.
Nowadays, you don't actually have to put your address into the record. Just your name is perfectly fine.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner. I noticed the young lady that won the award this afternoon was commended for being politically astute. Unfortunately, I don't share that quality. I more call it like it is.
My kind of guy.
And the council basically infringed on our constitutional rights. And, you know, you're our neighbors. We're supposed to be working together. And we pointed that out, I in particular did, to council before they adopted the ordinances. And I don't necessarily lay all the blame on the council. I put the blame somewhat at the feet of staff. I think that you were misinformed, grossly misinformed during their presentations and conduct of the previous committee.
Sir, can I just say something on that point? And I've been on this council now for 11 years, so I'm just going to offer an insight. You are on the verge of getting something that you want, that you fought hard for. Now, you can take the time and disparage people who have been part of the process up to this moment, or you can give us a reason why we should support this particular change. But I would remind you that when the battle has been won, there are often extra points for being gracious.
He already told us he wasn't politically astute, Commissioner.
And I'll just also say this, just speaking for myself, I have never found any testimony that disparages staff to be particularly helpful in reaching a conclusion on the merits. In fact, we tend to be very protective of our staff because they have very hard jobs and they most often work at our direction. So when there are problems at the staff level, really, we should be charged with whatever the deficiency is. So I just offer that as a perspective because you're on the verge of getting something you want, and you may just want to filter that as you think about whatever your comments are.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll take that under advisement and do away with a lot of the emails I was going to quote from this afternoon. But there's one in particular that's not an email. It's a letter from the city attorney to our attorney dated last November 30th. And it says in part, as to your allegation that the law is unconstitutional, I respectfully disagree. I'm happy to review any cases you have to support your perspective. And this letter was sent to Mayor Wheeler, all the commissioners, and the city attorney, Tracy Reeve. We did present those cases to the city attorney, and you forged ahead. Not only did you forge ahead, you went to the mat. We went every hearing and deposition that I attended, we had one attorney, and the city had 2 or 3 attorneys and bureau heads in attendance. We spent over $500,000 on this deal, and I think you guys must have spent 2 or 3 times that much fighting us.
So,
And
sir, if I may, so I wasn't here when the original vote took place. But the day I took office on January 2nd, I started working to make sure that I was listening to the voices of all the letters and emails and people that came into my office. You might know that I believe it was March or April that we actually pushed out the deadline, right? Because again, as the new kid on the block, it was my job to educate myself about the issue, to listen to all the people who are going to be impacted by the city council vote. And my office has been working tirelessly, especially the Bureau of Emergency Management, to be respectful of the diversity of opinions around what's the right approach to take. We are here today because, quite frankly, I think today we are in a place where we're going to ultimately have a better outcome. And we're going to have a better outcome because we have taken into account all the voices. And so let me just say, attorneys do what attorneys do, which is provide advice. The buck stops with us, the 5 people that you elected to serve you, right? If you agree with what we're doing today, it would warm my heart for you to say something nice about what we're doing today. I can't control what happened in October, but I can control what happens from today moving forward.
Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Thank you.
That will be, I appreciate the fact that you're repealing these 3 ordinances, and I think it is the right thing to do.
Hallelujah. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Who's next?
Hi. Hi, my name's Angie Even. I
You can
came,
move that mic if it's more comfortable.
okay. My name's Angie Even, and today I came because I've been elected over the last 3 years to be somewhat of a spokesman for the mom and pop building owners. And I do want to.
Let me just say, I've learned a few things about social media by watching you very closely. How you use social media. You're very effective.
Thank you. I like facts. So I'm here to thank you for your leadership, Commissioner Hardesty, and for the commissioners that came out publicly and came out against the placards. I've been a resident of Portland for almost 60 years. I'll have my 60th birthday next month. And it was so disappointing to go to that trial that we're talking about and hear ex-Commissioner Saltzman under oath say that the reason for the placards was to put economic pressure on the building owners. I think we've had a complete breakdown through this process that I am encouraged that we could turn around. Lawsuits are never going to be the answer, but when the community feels they're not listened to, unfortunately, there's a place where people turn to the law. And so I don't think there's any winners or losers, but I do think the whole city loses when communication breaks down. And the building owners have spent the last 2 or 3 years just trying to be heard. I do fear that we could return to more legal action, and only because there are many facets of the lawsuit that proved flaws within the system, as far as the list and as far as the other buildings that were deleted out of the project. It's my intent, and has always been my intent, to force the city to work with us and do this with us and not to us. And so I'm hoping with that, that we can have a good relationship going forward. And again, the building owners appreciate that you are repealing the placard ordinance. We didn't think that it was the right thing to do. Thank you.
And last but not least?
My name is Tim Even, and I would like to thank you all too. I'm very glad that you're repealing the placards. And going forward, I would like you all to be more transparent, you and your staffs. Like even this morning when you started into this, you didn't mention that you lost the court case. You didn't. You made it sound like you guys were repealing this out of your own good hearts. But all the different testimony that went forward through all this process, all these last 4 years, was mostly by the public, and it was all saying it was the wrong process, and no one up here listened to any of that. No one.
So let me just say, sir, you will have your time, but I disagree. The reason I didn't mention the lawsuit is because the work I've done since January 2nd had absolutely nothing to do with the lawsuit. And so I just want to be clear about that.
I understand that's your position, and I thank you for coming to the council and making this go forward. I really
Yes.
appreciate that.
Right.
But I've been involved with it longer than that, and I've seen what I've seen, and there's been a lot of process here
Well,
that has
know
been
that I don't
ignored.
take anything away from your lived experience, but I don't want to be misconstrued as somehow I'm trying to slip this in because of a lawsuit.
No.
Didn't
I
care
just-
about the lawsuit, had nothing to do with the lawsuit. You know, the lawsuit is the lawsuit. For me, it was, I am now in charge of the bureaus that has a responsibility for implementing this.
Okay.
Can I do it in a way that is just, that is fair? and that actually really listens to the community members who were involved and impacted. And so that's why where we're headed is where we're headed. So I want to be clear about that.
And I want to thank you very much for that. And going forward, I want you all to be that way, and I want you to all be transparent, and I want you to all know what you're voting on, because some of you, it was clear, didn't know a lot of the different processes in this, and maybe your staff was running it for you, but I don't know who made the mistake, and I appreciate you saying that, not to gloat. I'm not gloating. I'm just saying going forward with this and the next process, it needs to all be transparent. And part of that transparency is that your list is inaccurate, and that was brought up in the court case. And also, your report this was all based on was based on vulnerable buildings. And if you look in the table of contents, that report shows that there's other vulnerable buildings. But then if you look at that page, those were removed. And it came out in court that the list is that those other vulnerable buildings were removed because it wouldn't be palatable for the council to vote on. So in transparency, that should not happen in any processes going forward in the future. But I am so proud of you all for repealing this placard case, and I commend you on it.
Thank you.
That concludes public testimony. Is there any discussion? Carla, please call the roll.
Udaly?
Well, this is an extremely challenging and urgent issue. Few jurisdictions in the country and around the world have figured out what to do with these buildings. And as a council, we have to place public safety and human life before all other considerations. This was one of the most frustrating issues I had to deal with while I had BDS, and I inherited the ITAP permitting system, if that tells you anything. And although I ultimately didn't support this item, I did and do still feel strongly about the right of people who live and work in these buildings to get to make an informed decision as to whether they want to take that risk. We know we are overdue for a major earthquake. We know that URMs present an increased hazard, and we must revisit this issue sooner than later. Everyone has to figure out how we're going to pay for this. The city owns a number of these buildings. Nonprofits own a number of these buildings, and private property owners own them. The solutions are going to look different for everyone, but I'm sure you're all well aware that this conversation isn't over, but I support this action and I vote aye.
Fish?
Well, first, let me thank our newest colleague, Commissioner Hardesty, for taking this on, leading this issue, taking a fresh look, and getting us to this point. Second, I want to thank all the staff who, after all, get their marching orders from the council for their work. Third, I appreciate the admonitions from a number of people today about how we can do our work better. I've been doing this for 11 years, and I get up every morning sincerely thinking about how I can do my job better and to be more effective in what I do. I will tell you that on this issue, I too did not support the underlying ordinance. On this issue, I have spent countless hours meeting with advocates who are extremely effective in making their case. I have done site visits, and I have been pretty transparent about the concerns that I have with the press. If that falls short of some people's standard about transparency, then I have more work to do. But on this issue, I have tried in my own way to be clear about my concerns and my values. And I don't think there's a single meeting that I've declined. And I have spent a lot of time. Is Pippa here today? Well, she wasn't able to be here. But there's a formidable group of advocates who came together, many of whom I've met with, learned a lot from. So I appreciate the process. It is okay to have disagreements, and sometimes it's okay to go to court. It's part of the checks and balances. Footnote, we are as a city being asked to cover the attorney fees of Mr. DiLorenzo. Next time, I hope you'll find a pro bono lawyer who doesn't charge $700 an hour so that we can have these fights without these monster legal bills. But this morning, we had a discussion about how to make our Bull Run water system more resilient. And it's interesting, here we are having this conversation where we're all struggling with the same challenge, which is how do we prepare for a seismic event? How do we come up with a cost-effective way of encouraging people to do the right thing? How do we do it building on consensus and thoughtful policy? Well, we had a leading advocate this morning in all things water, the head of one of the most engaged organizations having to do with the Water Bureau, whose official and historic position has been, we should not have a single resilient pipe under the Willamette River to provide water to the west side. So, these are big, messy conversations. And one thing I've learned is that it doesn't necessarily matter where you start out, and sometimes disagreements and conflict is inevitable. The question is, when you hit reset and you try something new, you're bringing as many people along as you can. That's what I have sensed that Commissioner Hardesty has done. That's why I think today is a day to maybe put aside some of the past and to pivot to the future. And I have a lot of confidence in her approach. And when I looked at the names of the people who are going to be nominated for the committee, I have even more confidence. So today, I think, is a day to say, okay, that was then. We're entering a new chapter. We all share the same goal of a more resilient city. The question is, how can we get there in a cost-effective way that brings as many people along as possible? So thank you, and I'm pleased to vote aye.
Hardesty?
Thank you. I want to thank the people that came out just to see in person if we were really going to do what it was you thought we were going to do. I appreciate the passion that people have brought to this issue. As the newest member of the City Council, I feel I have an obligation to listen to people from all sides of any and all issues. I believe that we're moving in the right direction, and as Commissioner Fish has said, it is important. I have big shoulders. I have thick skin, so I don't mind when people yell at me or tell me I don't know what I'm doing too much. But what I hope is as we leave this chamber today, that we all share the same goal, which is I think all of us can agree that we are overdue for a big one. I think we can all agree that any life loss is too much. I think we can all agree that there's no simple solution to how we do what we need to do. I hope we also agree that each of us have a role in actually making the whole better. Once we have done this resolution, we will move on and talk about the new committee that will continue the work. I apologize to those of you who've spent 4 years on this issue. I have only spent 10 months, and it feels like 10 years. But I am so excited and so appreciative, both to the great staff, and I want to acknowledge the Director of the Bureau of Emergency Management, Mike Myers, who's in the audience. I want to reinforce once again Jonna and the incredible work that she's done reaching out to every single corner of the constituents that are impacted by this issue. And this is something I rarely do. I actually want to really appreciate my staff person, Derek Bradley, who, like me, neither of us had even heard the word URM before we got in this building. And now it is safe to say that we are experts on URM. If I don't know the answer, Derek does. And if he doesn't, he'll find it. Thank you all. I think we're going to have a much better process once this next phase has been completed. I vote aye.
Fritz?
I agree with each of my colleagues, and I thank you for your eloquent statements. this is an area where people disagree. And I agree with Commissioner Hardesty on the things we do agree on. But there was considerable disagreement when we were discussing this, however many years ago it was. Jana Papaafthimiou has been working on this for at least the almost 11 years that I've been on the council, and it keeps coming back, and it keeps coming back, and it keeps coming back. So it's not true to say that everybody was telling us don't do it, and there was a vote of there was a 3-2 vote. So now we're reversing what we had tried to do. I would have to say I've been to the Keller Auditorium several times since the placards went up, and they still seem to be attracting quite a lot of people to the events there, and indeed I go and I enjoy them. So we do need to do more. We know that we have a disaster coming, and that is the real challenge. Aye. So that is done. Please read the next item.
Item 995, create, appoint members, adopt bylaws, and authorize the Bureau of Emergency Management and Development Services to convene an unreinforced masonry building work group.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Madam President. I am delighted to introduce a resolution appointing a new work group focused on the serious risks of unreinforced masonry buildings. I am asking them to develop solutions that support building owners who want to make retrofits. Although a previous council expected this group to recommend mandatory retrofits, I believe we will have greater success working with all parties if no one is negotiating under that kind of pressure. So I want to be clear, we are not anticipating any mandates coming back from the new work group that will be put in place. However, I think what our goal is to create a committee that has a whole menu of options for business owners, for arts organizations, for faith institutions, to actually be able to identify how they get resources to support their upgrades. Again, I want to be clear that the city of Portland is not in a position to be able to afford to retrofit all the private URM buildings in Portland. And so I don't expect anything to come out of the work group that actually has a recommendation that the city will foot the bill, because we just won't and we can't. The committee will meet as a big group to address some of the core issues, but they also will have subcommittees focused on the unique needs of for-profits and nonprofit buildings. Jana Papaafthimiou will make a short presentation on the ordinance. As she's coming up, actually, before the vote, I'll have another short statement. Thank you. I'm going to practice that. I'm going to stand in my mirror and practice.
Thank you.
The next time you're in front of us, I'm going to be so much better.
That'll be in a year when the work group's done working, hopefully.
Yes, that's the plan.
Thank you very much. Again, just for the record, I'm Jana Papaafthimiou with the Bureau of Emergency Management. And this is the fun part of the presentation where we get to talk about the work that we're going to do going forward. So why are we doing this? After all these 11 years, we still don't have the answers, but we are pretty clear on what the problems are, and we know that we're in it together. And as Betsy Ames would remind us, persistence pays. So we still have a 22 to 26% likelihood of a big earthquake here in the next 50 years. URM buildings are very dangerous in earthquakes. FEMA says they're the most dangerous buildings, and we believe there are at least 1,600 of them here in the city, and that includes buildings the city owns, schools, the Keller Auditorium, and many private buildings. What have we learned? Well, in the years we've been working on this, we've learned a lot. We did a look back in our own permitting system, and we see that life safety retrofits are happening slowly and that more than 80% of URMs haven't been retrofitted yet. We also, looking at case studies and at published information, know that the retrofits are expensive, and moreover, the costs are hard to predict in old buildings because they're old and they have many other issues that can be uncovered in that process. We know, as the Commissioner Hardesty said, the city cannot afford to do all this work, but also that the cost and the unpredictability is very alarming to property owners. We recognize that mandatory retrofits could lead to displacement And I think that's something that came loud and clear out of the last process, is that those displacement risks are highest in historically underserved neighborhoods and in gentrifying neighborhoods where we really want to be shoring up those long-term institutions that are still present and that may be in URM buildings. So what are we going to do with what we've learned? As the commissioner also said, we're going to remove the expectation that retrofits will be mandatory. And instead, we're going to be open to all solutions and move forward with a new committee that has diverse interests. We're going to rely on a third-party facilitator that has strong experience in both public policy and equity, and a facilitator that, although our bureau will certainly be paying them, really works for the process and works for the committee and not for any staff person. We are going to build on the work that we've already done. I think a lot of their factual basis was good, and we want to rely on that and not reinvent it. But we will have an opportunity to do things like look back at the URM inventory. I am confident that the committee will want to examine that and form their own opinions about its quality or any changes that are needed. They're also obviously going to look back on the cost assumptions that we've made so far and see where more data might be needed. So we're going to build on that work for the next year, and then I'll be back with my committee. I just want to be clear on the committee purpose. This is also from their bylaws, which is Exhibit C in the council packet, that they make recommendations to reduce life safety risks and reduce displacement, that their recommendations can include both finance and policy levers, that they need to recognize for-profit and not-for-profits are different. Churches and arts organizations have a different financial picture than for-profit buildings, and that their support programs would be voluntary, but they can still have standards to receive the benefits of participation. As the commissioner emphasized, and I would also like to emphasize, it is not required or expected that the work group will recommend mandatory retrofits, but is expected that the voluntary retrofits will be scaled to need. These are the names of folks for the new committee. We had an open application process that followed Civic Life's recommended best practices. We ran the selection process like job interviews, so we had a committee of staff and community members, not including myself or anyone that has been directly connected to the project up to now. They made the initial selections, and then we did some targeted recruitment because churches and people in banking were underrepresented, and we knew those interests were important. We came up with the list of names here. I regret we also came up with 2 additional members that have withdrawn in the last few weeks. One because she was a tenant and she was forced to move out of the city and therefore won't be able to serve on the committee. She doesn't work here either. And we also had a member who has health concerns and won't participate. We were really honored to have more than 70 people apply to be on the committee, so I'm confident we can go back to those applications and find 2 more members to speak to those interests, and the bylaws permit the commissioner to appoint additional members for vacancies. And that is, in summary, everything that we're moving forward with today. We're appointing the work group and we're adopting their bylaws. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So can I clarify a couple of things, Jonna?
Please.
The work group meetings will be open to the public?
Absolutely.
And where will people be able to find information about dates and times?
Oh, thank you. We haven't set the first date yet. I expect it will be in November, and I imagine that the first meeting will be at the Bureau of Development Services. We'll post it on our website as soon as it's available, and I also, in partnership with Angie, I'm sure, will publicize it to all our social media links and email lists.
And minutes of the meetings will be taken?
Minutes will be taken by our third-party facilitation firm and posted online.
Good. And finally, this is a large committee. One of our roles is to make sure that there's been no protest filed by anybody about the composition, who's in, who's out, or anything like that. So has anybody that applied for the position and didn't get it, or any other person with an interest in this, raised a concern about the composition of this committee?
I am definitely aware that several applicants were disappointed. And as I said, but it was more, my understanding was an expression of personal disappointment because of their concern for the issue and not because they felt that there was any unfairness.
And with respect to the composition of the committee, the diversity of viewpoints at the table, the sort of what you've cobbled together, have we received any complaints about that?
Let me think. I don't believe that we have. Certainly, I think building owners would, some building owners would perhaps argue that building owners ought to form the majority of the committee. And I think that certainly their knowledge as owners will inform all the work that we do. But we felt like architects, engineers, people in finance would have a lot to contribute to the problem solving. Again, with mandatory retrofits off the table, the hope is that we all have the same goal, which is to make them possible.
I'm sorry, one other question. I anticipate on some of these issues that there could be strong feelings on both sides. Will we have the benefit of majority and minority reports on these issues?
We will, and thank you for asking that. That's actually in the bylaws. We intend to do like sort of a red, green, yellow voting system, and so whenever there's someone that a recommendation can't move forward, if a member is voting red, and we'll have minority reports. So the final can include many views if we don't reach consensus.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Day? Thank you, Madam President. Is there any plan to replace the two people who are unable to serve with two alternates?
Yes, there were numerous other applicants representing both tenants and small businesses, so I think we'll go back to the list of originally interested parties and see who is still able to participate.
I'm glad to hear that, because I do think those are two important voices in this conversation. And I think the biggest concern that I heard from building owners about the original group that was convened was there wasn't enough representation of kind of smaller time property owners.
Yes.
Have we solved that?
I hope
issue
so.
that's around?
Looking to the list, let's see, we have three folks, actually, we have three folks who own URM buildings, and I think two of them live in them, and one runs a small business out of them. We have a third person who owns several pieces of real estate, but including several URMs. And then we have someone who owns a condominium in a URM building, too.
So that sounds like 5.
That's 5.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Commissioner Hardison?
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Jonna. I just wanted to put on the record, as Jonna mentioned, we had over 70 Portlanders apply to be on this work group. So what we know is that the work group is the work group, but we will be seeking advice from other experts who have had lived experience around this issue. No voice is going to be eliminated, but we thought it was important to prioritize those who would not have access to like tax breaks or tax incentives to do the upgrades. And so thinking about how faith institutions, how nonprofits, and how others that fall into those categories would be able to best respond to this need. I also want to be clear that when the work group is completed with their work, the work group will make a presentation to this body, right? So it is not my job to filter what work the work group has come up with, but to lay it all out here at the council chambers in public so that the public really understands what we did, why we did what we did, and what the expectations are as we move forward. I also want to appreciate Director Mike Myers, who has said that he will facilitate quarterly community meetings just to make sure that people have opportunities for updates throughout the process, right? So sometimes when we have work groups that we have put together, the public doesn't actually get to weigh in on what the decisions are that those work groups are making until the very end. We're going to be taking public comment throughout the process. And so I hope everyone will come to this process with a sense of, this is a new day. We've got a new opportunity, and let's get it right this time because the lives of Portlanders depend on us getting it right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. How many people signed up, please?
We have 4.
Okay, call the first 3, please.
First 3 are Jim Atwood, Vic Savara, and Angie Even.
Here we are again.
Thank you. Jim Atwood, ATWOOD. I thank you again for repealing the ordinances, and I very much respect the positive outlook for the future. We as building owners have been concerned about this second go-around. In particular, there early on was the expectation was mandatory retrofits. And, just think of your parks buildings. I have an email from your parks people to 11 city employees. It says, though some portfolio has been partially retrofitted, a low confidence estimate program is $50 to $250 million for parks buildings for seismic retrofits. Again, the higher number reflecting that the retrofit project will encounter many other issues at these buildings, code and necessary repair issues. Basically, the city owns, according to this, Parks has 330,000 square feet of unreinforced masonry buildings, and their estimates are on the order of $500 a square foot, with plus a 30% contingency. My estimates from 2014 that were promulgated through Portland Development Commission for my small building was on the order of $350 a square foot in 2014. So $500 a square foot today is not an unrealistic number. During the testimony for the previous ordinances, the experts were quoting figures from $9 a square foot to $90 a square foot. That's clearly wrong. At $500 a square foot, if you mandate a retrofit, you're basically taking the property down because this is twice the replacement cost of most buildings. So it is would be a regulatory taking, and I know you don't want the city to pay for all the retrofits, but if a mandatory retrofit would, I think, involve a regulatory taking, and of course, as owners, you're dealing with our lives, and so we would be remiss if we didn't try to protect our livelihoods. Most of the $500,000 we spent on legal fees, you're reimbursing us, and we are holding that war chest, waiting the outcome of this process. And I hope that it proceeds as you described it here today. I would be very pleasantly surprised and happy about that.
Man, you're a hard crowd, aren't you? Madam President, if I may. I hear you. Had I been spending 4 years saying the same thing over and over and over again and feeling like no one was listening to me, I would probably feel just like you do. What I would ask you to do is to hold judgment. See if we do what we say we're going to do. And let me assure you that at any point that you think that we're off the rail and we're not doing what we've said we were going to do in this process, my office is open to you.
I'll take you up on that, Commissioner.
All right, appreciate that.
And I'm sorry to say we're not going to get rid of our $700 an hour lawyer.
Well,
You might negotiate a different fee schedule.
I'll bring that up with them. Thank you. I have nothing further.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you. One of you, yes.
Howdy. My name is Vic Savara, and I'm an owner of a URM. And I've been involved with this process since day one. I just want to let you know how thankful I am for the opportunity which we have right now to be a part of a program which is totally has us as a part of the solution. I'm looking forward to being a part of that committee. I have two comments to make. Okay, one is a very general comment. Okay, when I was being interviewed, I made the statement that, I wish that this committee was not so narrowly focused, that it would have been great for the city of Portland to have a committee to look at earthquake preparedness, of which buildings is one, and URMs are a part of that building. Okay, I just hoped that thing could be in that direction, but I was informed that the resolution which was being, on which this committee was being formed was very narrow. So I just want to share with you, I think there is an opportunity here for the city, okay, to lead. Okay, that's all. The other question which I have, the other is more of a recommendation to the commissioners. I must say, I want to thank Jana, okay, because she listened. Thank you. Okay, I want to thank you. Okay, and there is one aspect which I think there's an opportunity for improvement. There are 15 members in the committee for, let's call it for-profit URMs, of which there are only 3 URM owners. I've been involved in many committees, and if I'm representing 1,600 building owners and only 3 in this committee, okay, it's going to be difficult, okay, to convey and to influence the thought process of 1,600 people. I just wanted to bring that up as an opportunity. I was also a little bit shocked to look at the list of people in the for-profit section included 2 investor developers. And I'm saying to myself, the whole purpose of this committee is not to have a situation where all of the people in the group have one focused decision point, okay? But here we have 2 people. The people are, I'm not talking about the person itself, but just the thing. 2 people whose role is break the buildings down so that we can develop new properties. I don't believe that that is appropriate. And I would like the commissioners to examine the possibility of converting those 2 investor developers positions in the committee to URM owners. That's all. And thank you so very much, okay? It's such a pleasure coming to a commissioner meeting where there's no one shouting and everything else. I've gone through so many.
You're telling
Thank you so
us.
very much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Angie Even, and again, I came today to lend some voice to the mom and pop building owners. Again, I want to thank you again, and Commissioner Hardesty, I really want to thank you for this new direction. I think it's the right direction. I have conducted over the last couple of years, our group, the pub, they call us the pub group because we used to meet in a bar, is that one of the things that I think that you would be enlightened by is to know that when we meet, we don't just complain. We actually talk about solutions. And I wanted to do just one short thing, and that is a shout out to an owner that we lost this summer. And he spent the last 4 years of his life before he was diagnosed with a brain tumor, which he only lived 20-some days, retrofitting his building. And Jim was somebody that everybody looked to in our meetings for solutions for roof retrofits because he knew everything. And I think what I want to leave you with is that when you said that you didn't know what a URM was, either did we. And this dropped in our laps. And most of us are at the sunset of our lives. We're not young. And we didn't plan for this. And we're not developers. 7% of the buildings are 4 stories or more. The rest are little buildings on the main streets. My husband and I bought our building because we had a flower shop for 22 years. We're not, what I've seen and what really charged me and made me become what some people call me an advocate or an activist, which I've never considered myself, is that people have had to fear. And when people have a sense of fight or flight, there's never good decisions made. And so I really appreciate, and I know the building owners do too, to see some of that pressure relieved from us. We're cautiously optimistic, but we're going to go into it with that optimism. And Vic is one of the people on the committee, and I agree with Vic. It would be nice to see a higher percentage of building owners. It's actually 16%. And that seems very, very slight compared to what's at stake for these owners. And they've got good solutions if you meet with them. And some of it is innovation and thinking outside the box of things that aren't so expensive but still mitigate risk. Thank you.
Would you like to give us Jim's full name?
Jim Wilson.
Thank you, and thank you for all his work.
Yeah,
Thank you both.
Thank you.
And we have one more person.
Yes, the last person is Steve Fleischman.
Thank you.
Sorry. Welcome.
Hello and good afternoon. My name is Steve Fleischman, last name spelled Fleischman. I really appreciate the opportunity to just share some thoughts with you on this issue. I am coming to this a little late, but I am, for the last year, I've been an owner-occupant of a historic building that is on the URM list, and wanted to provide my perspective as we move forward. I'm really pleased by the actions that have been taken today and the actions that are being contemplated to be taken moving forward. So I wanted to thank you for that. I want to just share with you that I spend a lot of time at our HOA meetings, which are monthly, and I can assure you that everybody in our building, which is a small one, loves our building and loves living there and is worried about losing it. As we just heard, fear is not a good way to live or a very good basis for making good decisions that are in the interests of everybody. We love our building. We don't want to lose it. We don't want to lose it for ourselves personally because it would be highly disruptive. But we also believe that living in a historic building, we have a kind of a trust where we are carrying on part of the cultural fabric of this community. And we want to preserve that. And I appreciate, Commissioner Fish, that you spoke about resiliency. And I wanted to expand resiliency to go beyond structural resiliency, to talk about community resiliency. I know a lot of people that are concerned about the URM issue are tying the buildings to cultural, structural, social resiliency, to things that go beyond the brick and mortar, the weak brick and mortar that we face right now. So I wanted to just bring that up and appreciate what you have done today. Thank Commissioner Hardesty and the City Council for taking up this issue again, and it seems to me that moving forward very constructively. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Fish, you said this morning that you have a hard out. Would you like us to suspend the rules and have you vote first?
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Could you do that, please, Carla? Call vote.
Fish?
I think it is a pretty terrific list. There's some real heavy hitters on this list. The way you've structured it, the bylaws, the commitment to transparency, the timeline. I think you, Commissioner, you've set yourself up in your bureau for success. You've given yourself the best chance. That doesn't mean that when recommendations come forward, that we'll have unanimity in our community. And in a democracy, that's a healthy thing. We can have disagreements. They should be civil, always. But what I'm encouraged by is I think we're starting this reset with a shared commitment to the underlying values that you articulated so well at the beginning, which is the safety of our community and our people. We have this enormous challenge about making our community more resilient, but we don't know how to pay for it. And we are painfully aware that some of the policy proposals of the past had unintended consequences. So now we're going back and we're looking at other ways of getting there. But I'm heartened that we all start from a place of shared values. Now the question is, can a thoughtful group of people sitting around a table come up with some recommendations which move us forward? I'm encouraged by what I've heard and seen today, so I'm pleased to vote aye. Thank you.
Udaley?
Aye.
Hardesty?
I want to again thank John. 11 years. I mean, I had no idea you'd been doing URMs for 11 years, and that sounds a little daunting to me. But what I appreciate is the spirit of cooperation that I have seen since I've been here. And I would be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to also thank my colleagues, because as you know, in this body, you need 3 people to do anything, and you need 4 when you're passing something that's an emergency. And the fact that all my colleagues are standing with me today really highlights the importance of the work that we have ahead of us. I want to be also mindful that, as I think most people know, URMs are not the only danger that we face in an earthquake. So I am proud of the work that Mike Myers is doing as the director of the Bureau of Emergency Management to ensure that we are developing a resiliency plan so that we know, because what we already know is that poor communities, communities of a color, will be hit hardest and will be the slowest to be able to come back from whatever the big it is. And so know that we take on this task understanding that the clock is ticking, understanding that we have an obligation to be as thoughtful and as inclusive as possible, and also that we have an obligation to make sure that we are modeling really good public engagement processes. So at the end of the day, when we come back a year from now with our report, it is my hope that this council chamber is filled, and it's filled with primarily people who say, you know, I don't like this piece, but I like that. But overall, we have agreement that we're moving in the right direction. Thank you all. Thank you for your heart. Thank you for your participation. I vote aye.
Fritz.
So the word skeptical has been used quite a lot today, and I will have to say that I am somewhat skeptical that this committee is going to come back with is it going to actually get movement on this challenge? Because it cannot come back and say, city, you're going to pay for it all, or will it have the state pay for it all? Because that's just not going to happen. As was mentioned, we have significant unreinforced masonry buildings within the city's inventory that we need to figure out how to pay for, and we haven't yet. So I hope that this committee will, this is another time where I hope I'm wrong, that this committee will come up with some actual methods of getting improvements built so that not if, but when the big earthquake happens, or even a fairly small one, damage is not done to people. And thank you very much to all the committee members and to Commissioner Hardesty for being willing to lead this work. Aye. With that, we are adjourned.